Barry?
Well, thank you, Mike, and thank you all for coming. I know it's a pretty day outside, and I'd actually rather be outside myself. The shad are running, and I was up on Fletcher's Boathouse a couple of weeks ago in D.C., and there were lots of shad in the water. But anyway, what I want to start talking about today is not fishing, but actually another thing that happened in the water, which is the Tea Party. There's been a lot of talk about tea parties in this country recently, and I think it's important for us to get the story of the original Tea Party right. A lot of folks say that the Tea Party was a rebellion against high taxes, and that's not really the case, because actually the tea that was going to be landed was going to be considerably cheaper than the tea that people were drinking at that time. And then, well, some people say that the Tea Party was against the principle of taxation without representation, which is true, except that we have to remember that for a long time people thought that that tax had been entirely rescinded, and still they planned to rebel. The Boston Tea Party was a rebellion against monopoly. The folks in America back then, they did not want one company governing their trade in tea and governing their trade in all kinds of other goods. Not even when the company brought lower prices. What they wanted was liberty to trade. They wanted liberty to make their own markets with each other. The original Tea Partiers, the founders of the country, they accepted taxation within reason. What they rejected was monopolization, and they rejected that completely. What we have to understand about America is that America was, in many ways, a rebellion against monopoly. It was against monopolization over our souls by any one church. It was a rebellion against monopolization over land by any one or few lords. It was a rebellion against monopolization over trade and commerce and over our markets. For 200 years in this country, we used our anti-monopoly laws to protect us against concentrated economic power, hence concentrated political power. That's what the purpose of these laws were for. In a way, we could look at our anti-monopoly laws. It was a way of extending the doctrine, the concept of checks and balances into the political economy. In some ways, the one great misfortune about our anti-monopoly laws or antitrust laws is the fact that we got the word anti in them. It kind of makes them seem a little bit negative, because at the heart of our anti-monopoly laws is a very positive and important vision, and it's a simple and elegant vision, and it's a vision of an independent republic made up of independent citizens. And it's important just to take a moment to talk about what that means. Independent republic, that requires us to use our government to fight all mercantilist efforts by monopolists in other countries to dominate trade over some activity in this country. The founders understood the word free trade. It didn't mean protection, but it also meant that you would never allow any other one country to dominate any other one thing. And the idea of an independent citizen, the basic idea there is that every citizen of the country, or as many citizens as possible, would have property and the liberty to work that property, the liberty to bring that property and their work to an open market. And this property, we have to understand the word property. It was not just real property. It's not just land, not just machines, but it was the concept back then was property included labor itself. This is something that James Madison made very clear in his writings. He viewed labor as a form of property, and you had a right to exercise it, free of control by other people. And one of the great things about James Madison is that he was very realistic. He understood that not every individual would be truly independent, at least all of the time. His goal was to distribute power as much as possible. He wanted to enable as many citizens as possible to make themselves as free as possible at any one moment. Over the years, a lot of folks called Madison and Jefferson naive. They said that their vision of independent property holders kind of impeded the specialization of labor, which is a way to increase the amount of wealth in the system and make everyone richer. But Madison's view is actually very practical politically. He understood that those who preached specialization of labor, what they actually wanted was to concentrate capital, they wanted to concentrate power, they wanted to concentrate control. What he also understood is that independent citizens, people who actually saw themselves as independent, who viewed themselves as independent, he saw these people as essential to the preservation of liberty. He said, and this is a quote, he said, "These people are the best basis of public liberty. They're the bulwark against the would-be lords." He expressed this kind of in a simple equation. He goes, and this is an equation that today's quants can't really capture. He said, the greater the proportion of this class, of the independent property holders, to the whole society, the more free, the more independent, and the more happy must be society itself. It's very important for us to remember that this vision is not also a vision that was isolated in time. It is not something that was only of the early 19th century. There was a long period in this country when that vision of an independent property holder was erased. That long period in the late 19th century when the plutocrats were in control. The long period in the early 20th century when the corporatists were in control. The independent property holder was kind of shunted aside. But this vision was resurrected. In the early 1930s, we actually resurrected this vision in the Second New Deal. The people, the populists in the New Deal, they prevailed again. And this is, I mean, at a time, early 1930s, at a time when Germany, when Japan, when Russia were falling deeper and deeper into authoritarian, even totalitarian horror, in the United States, the people actually resurrected a democratic republic during the Second New Deal. And to understand what was accomplished, and this is after the plutocrats had been in control, this was after the corporatists had been in control, understand what was accomplished during the Second New Deal, I'm going to turn to the words of Supreme Court Justice William Douglas. This was a half-century ago. He said these words in a case in which big oil companies were attempting to capture control of independent gasoline stations. And he goes, when independents are swallowed up by the trusts and the entrepreneurs become employees of absentee owners, the result is a serious loss in citizenship. Local leadership is diluted. He who was a leader in the village, in the town, becomes dependent on outsiders for his actions and policy. Clerks responsible to a superior in a distant place take the place of resident proprietors beholden to no one. So in the 20th century, in the middle of the 20th century, we recreated in this country a republic of independent citizens. And those of us who are somewhat older, over 40, you know, we remember this. We remember growing up in a country in which power was really distributed out to communities, distributed out to states. 2 years ago, when I started writing, started writing this book 2-3 years ago, when I told people I was writing a book about monopolization in America, people would look at me and say, "You're crazy. There's no monopolies in America. This is cowboy capitalism. This is the most competitive system in the whole that the world has ever seen." I mean, as Mike sort of suggested, we're maybe a little bit less certain of that now. You know, we've had the experience of what happened with Lehman Brothers and the meltdown, and we have the experience of what we learned from the debate about health insurance and learning about how much power has been concentrated in private hands there. We've had the experience of maybe watching films like Food Inc. or reading books like Michael Pollan's books and learning what's going on in our food system.